Thank God. Okay. Okay, now let's start with sharing. Where is it? Is it this one? Yeah, here we are. Okay. Good morning, Zalman.
Morning.
So we're in the middle of a conversation. You know what? Let's first make the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav tzivanu al divrei Torah. We are in the middle of a discussion about things which are not bread, but not cookies. So bread we make hamotzi, cookies we make the blessing borei minei mezonos. But what about cookies that you eat as a meal? Or as the Talmud quotes them, bread that comes in pockets, or breads that are served as dessert. So if it's served as dessert, then you will make mezonos. However, if you're eating that as your meal, would you now make hamotzi? So have anyone here had something called like you know what, a good example? No, not a good example. Something like a they call it a sambuki or something like that. It's almost like a calzone. You familiar with the calzone?
Oh yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Is that bread?
Well, I mean, there's bread in it, but there's also a lot of other stuff. It's kind of like a pizza. Well, it's a pizza in the shape
It's
of
a
a
pizza folded in
pocket.
half, right? So,
Yeah.
or even pizza itself. On the one hand, it's bread. On the other hand, it's not really bread. But at what point do we decide the difference between, for example, babka, which is also bread with filling, or a calzone, which is also bread with filling? They use
One's
similar
a
dough.
meal. Yeah, but it's not a cookie.
Exactly. One's a meal and one is not a meal. So that's going to be the bottom line. Is going to be, if it's a meal, then you make hamotzi. If it's not a meal, you make mazonos.
Okay. How about, let's say, a kreplach in chicken broth?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. The answer over there is going to be different because it's not baked. So since it's only boiled, then it's, but you're right, it's the same dough. A kreplach is the same dough.
Right.
A matzah ball, you take the matzah, the matzah, you crush it up, it's bread.
Okay, I got a really good one for you.
Go ahead.
Blintzes. They can be a meal or they can be dessert.
Oh, very good. Blintzes. What blessing do we make on blintzes? So over there, we're going to get into some more details about how runny is the consistency of the batter. You have dough, which is very thick. You have blintzes and crepes and stuff like that. What was it? I once went to this French breakfast place. It was really creepy. So you have regular dough, which is very thick. Then you have like blintzes and crepes, which are very thin, very runny texture. And then you have something like pancakes or waffles, where it's in the middle. So the thickness of the texture is also going to play into this. But again, the general rule to make this as simple as we can is going to be, if it's a meal, then it's hamotzi. If it's not a meal, then it's mazonos. It's a snack or a dessert. Okay. The Gemara relates another story. Rav Papa happened to come to the house of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Natan, and they ate. After they finished their meal, they brought before them something to eat. Rav Papa took the food item and ate it without reciting a blessing. They said to him, "Do you, master, not hold that once you finish your meal, you are forbidden to eat again without reciting a new blessing before you eat the food that was brought?" So he said to them, it doesn't depend on whether you finished your meal or finished eating. It depends on whether the table was taken away. So in those days, they didn't have big tables in the dining room that they would come and sit around. They had their area where they would lounge around on these low couches and pillows. And when it was time for eating, everyone would have a little table brought in front of them with the food. So he said that the correct version of that halacha, it is stated removed. One need recite a second blessing only after the table was removed from before him. So if I finished eating and they wiped up the plates, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. Let me just check if this is something urgent. I'm sorry. Hello? Okay, what address do you have? Yeah, that's good. When will you be there? You'll be there in 15 minutes. Okay, thanks. I apologize. I have a delivery coming. Can I just quickly check if Nechama can go to the house and pick that up?
Sure.
Okay, amazing. I'll be right back.
What's new, Paul?
Not too much. How about you?
Not much.
Boy, the market
Hmm?
we're making in the market we're making money hands over fist,
Yeah.
getting rich.
Well, the past week, although the month as a whole hasn't been that great.
I don't know since the first of the year. I mean, my portfolio is up like over.
Oh, yeah, the first of the year. Yes, definitely. I'm talking about this month.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, my greatest apologies.
No
Yeah,
problem.
she is able to get it, thank God. Some stuff for Friday night. Um, I'll be sending out an email hopefully today with with all the details. But that'll be this Friday night at 6 p.m. We'll be starting. Okay, so he said that the correct version of the halacha is that you only need to make a new blessing if the table was removed, because once the table is removed, that is what signifies that you have indeed finished your meal. But if they clean up the plates and you have not yet removed the table, it's still considered part of your meal, so you don't have to make a new blessing on the new food that they bring for dessert. Simple and straightforward. Similarly, the Gemara says another story. Now, why are we bringing so many stories? Because I think we've mentioned this before, that we can come with reasonings and sources for many, many hours to prove different things. But stories of what was actually done are considered the most crucial when it comes to knowing how Jewish law works. At the end of the day, if this is what we saw the great rabbis doing, then this is what is considered the correct way to act. So, similarly, the Gemara relates that Rava and Rav Zeira happened to come to the house of the exilarch. The exilarch is called the prince or the president in Hebrew, and the exilarch was the head of the Jewish people. He was a very, very well-respected man and had a lot of power, and he was respected by the government as well. After the meal, when they removed the table from before them, a portion of food was sent to them from the house of the exilarch. So that means they finished their meal, and the table was already removed. Rava ate it Rab Zera did not eat it. Rabbi Zera said to Rava, do you, master, not hold that once the table was removed, you are forbidden to eat? So he said, Rava, how are you able to eat if they took away our tables? And Rava answered, we are dependent upon the table of the exilarch. We're sitting here all around with him, and he is the one who determines when the meal is starting and when the meal is finishing. So as long as he has not completed his meal, his guests have not completed their meals either. So because we are guests at the house of the exilarch, so long as he still has his table in front of him, we are allowed to eat without having to make a new blessing. Rav said, one who is accustomed to applying fragrant oil to his hands after meals, failure to apply that oil delays the end of his meal, and he is not considered to have finished his meal and is not required to recite a blessing before continuing to eat. So if there is a custom or ritual that you do at the end of your meal, if you haven't yet done that ritual, then you are allowed to continue eating without having to make a new blessing. Similarly, Rav Ashi said, when we were in the house of Rav Kahane, he said to us, we, for example, are accustomed to oil. Failure to apply that oil delays the end of the meal for us. Nevertheless, the Gemara concludes, the halacha is not in accordance with all of these statements, and the end of the meal is not determined by those factors. Rather, it is determined by that which Rabbi Chia bar Ashi said in the name of Rav. There are three pairs that immediately follow each other. Immediately following placing the hands on the sacrifice and making a short prayer. That is when you have to do the slaughter straight away. Immediately following the blessing of redemption recited after Shema is the Amida prayer, and that's something that we've discussed at length. And immediately following the ritual washing of the hands after the meal is the blessing of grace after meals. Now you're going to ask me, what is this ritual washing of the hands after the meal? And so I will tell you, I don't know why we don't yet do it here. Maybe we should. I mean, for sure we should. Maybe soon we'll start doing that. Is that we rinse our fingertips with water. We'll learn more about it later. And once you have rinsed your fingertips with water, that is indicative of conclusion of your meal. I apologize. And as soon as you finish, thank you, as soon as you finish doing the ritual washing of the hands, so it's not a full washing of the hands like before we eat, it's a rinsing of the fingertips. And as after we've done that, that is what signifies the end of the meal. And at that point, you must recite grace after meals immediately. Abaya said on a similar note, we too will say, immediately following the entrance of Torah scholars into a house, blessing rests upon the house, as it is stated in regard to Laban and Jacob. The Lord has blessed me because of you. Or you could say from another proof, as it is stated in the story of Joseph and Potiphar. If you wish to say the proof is from here, as it is stated, and it was from when he placed him in charge of his house. And over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the house of the Egyptian on account of Joseph. Okay, now we are up to a new Mishnah. What happens if you have many different things with either the same blessing or different blessings? I think we've quoted this Mishnah before, but let's jump into it. Which things are included or exempted from your blessing? We know that when we make hamotzi, we no longer have to make a blessing on anything that's part of the meal, except for dessert. That's something that we see every week. Let's see the source for that, jumping in right now with the Mishnah. This Mishnah explains those cases and those circumstances in which blessings recited over particular foods exempt other foods at the meal from requirement to recite a blessing over them. One who recited a blessing over wine that one drank before the meal, with that blessing he exempted the wine that he drinks after the meal. Similarly, one who recited a blessing over the appetizers that one ate before the meal, with that blessing he exempted the appetizers that he eats after or during the meal. One who recited a blessing over the bread exempted the appetizers, as they are considered secondary to the bread. However, one who recited a blessing over the appetizers did not exempt the bread. Beis Shammai say that the blessing over the appetizers did not exempt even a cooked dish that he eats during the meal, which would be something Borei Minei Mezon knows. Okay. An additional halacha is cited if several people were sitting to eat. and they were not in the framework of a joint meal, each one recites a blessing for himself. If they were reclined on divans, what are divans?
Divans.
Divans. What are divans?
It's like a couch that's has like it's kind of shaped like an L, and you lean on it.
Is that like the old
And
Roman couches? Oh, there we go. Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, this is probably one of the more famous
Yeah,
kind of thing. It's
yeah,
right over here. Okay.
that's a classical one.
I learned something new. Which renders it a joint meal. One can recite a blessing on behalf of them all. One person can say the blessing, and everyone can respond Amen instead of making their own blessing. Okay, 42a is in the books. 42b, let's go. Additionally, if wine came before them during the meal, each and every diner recites a blessing over the wine for himself. If wine came at the end of the meal, one can make a blessing on behalf of them all. And he who recites a blessing over the wine also says the blessing over the incense, although they would only bring the incense to the diners after the meal. There would be some kind of incense that they used to light up, and everybody used to smell from it. I don't know what the purpose of that was. Says the Gemara, with regard to the Mishnah statement that wine that precedes a meal exempts wine that follows the meal, Rabbi Bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that this halacha is only taught with regard to Shabbat and festivals, because one can continue drinking at his leisure. One bases his meal on the wine. However, during the rest of the days of the year, one who drinks wine at a meal recites a blessing over every cup, as his original intention is not to drink a lot. So on Shabbos and festivals where there's nowhere to go and nowhere to drive, you drink a cup of wine, you're planning on drinking more. But during the week, Zalman can relate to this. You told me that you're drinking a lot more now that you're retired. When you're not retired, once you have a job, so you're gonna take a shot. You're gonna, okay, I'm gonna just have one shot. And then like, oh, we're still hanging around and talking and lunch break isn't yet over. Okay, we'll take another shot. But every shot that you take or every glass of wine that you drink, you're intending for it to be your last cup. And therefore, when you take a new cup, you have to make a new blessing on it. It was also stated that Rabba Bar Mari said in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. This was only taught in the Mishnah with regard to Shabbos and festivals, when a person emerges tired from the bathhouse and wishes to eat and rest, or during bloodletting, after which one tends to drink a lot, since on these occasions, one typically bases his meal on wine. However, during the rest of the days of the year, one who drinks wine at a meal recites a blessing over each and every cup. Okay. The Gemara now relates a story that Rabba Bar Mari happened to come to the house of Rava and was a regular day during the week. And he saw him recite a blessing over wine before the meal. And then after the meal, he drank another cup of wine and he made a new blessing over the new cup. And he said to him, the guest said to him, well done. And so too, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said that he had done proper conduct. The Gemara relates another story about Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, who visited the house of Abaya, and it was on a festival. And he saw that he was reciting a blessing over each and every cup of wine, which is different than what we learned, that he only has to make a blessing on one cup. Rabbi Yitzchak said to him, does the master not hold in accordance with the halacha of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, who said that on Shabbos and festivals, one blessing is sufficient? Abaya said to him, my original intention was not to base my meal upon wine, and with each cup I changed my mind and decided to drink it. Even Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi would agree, under those circumstances, one must recite a blessing over each and every cup, because your intention has a lot to do when it comes to reciting blessings. And if you had in mind to drink only one cup of wine, then when you make a new cup of wine, you have to drink again. Same thing will be if there's two cookies in front of you and you tell yourself, I'm going to eat only one of them now and one of them later, and you have intention to only eat one of the cookies, and then you change your mind and decide you want to eat the second cookie as well, because you know your wife or it just went and picked up a new box of cookies in the store, so you can finish this one too, and she'll still have cookies. You will have to make a new blessing on the second cookie. A dilemma was raised before the sages. What happens if wine came out to them during the meal? So we said if wine was before the meal, you make a blessing on the wine, and then after the meal, you can continue drinking. What happens if it wasn't before the meal? What happens if it was during the meal? The dilemma is as follows. If you say one who recited the blessing over wine that you drink before the meal, and with that blessing you exempted the wine that you drink after the meal, perhaps that is because the purpose of drinking the wine before the meal is to drink, and the wine after the meal you're drinking also just for drinking. However, here, where the purpose of drinking the wine after the meal is to drink, but the purpose of drinking the wine during the meal is to help moisten the food and facilitate its consumption. So you would say that because the wine during the meal and the wine after the meal are for two different purposes, the blessing on the wine that was during the meal is not going to work for the wine that you're drinking after the meal. Or perhaps there's no difference and all drinking is considered the same. Opinions differed. Rav said it does exempt, Rav Kahana said it does not exempt, Rav Nachman said it does exempt, and Rav Shesha said it does not exempt. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda and all the students of Rav said it does not exempt. Rava, who said Rava wasn't here in our list, raised an objection to Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said that if you drink during the meal, it exempts from the wine that's after the meal. So Rava is going to recite an objection to that from our Mishnah. If wine came before them during the meal, each and every diner recites a blessing over the wine for themselves. If the wine came after the meal, one recites a blessing on behalf of them all. So this would seem to be saying, as Rava is reading it, that even though everyone made a blessing on their own cup during the meal, afterwards someone still needs to make a blessing for all of them.
Rabbi, when you make the blessing, like during well, when we have a meal at the synagogue, you make the blessing and then we eat. Now, is that blessing? I mean, technically, it's before the meal because we haven't started eating, or does it signify the beginning of the meal as is part of the meal?
That is a very good question. You're talking about the blessing that we make over the wine in the beginning, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. So that is considered before the meal. The meal begins when we wash our hands and break bread.
Well, generally, don't we wash our hands first and then you make the blessing of the wine?
That's what I was thinking. That we wash our hands first?
On Shabbat, we first go in and make Kiddush. And we have the blessing over the wine. And then we go to the kitchen and wash our hands for bread. And then we come back and break bread, make a blessing, and eat.
Okay, so the wine that we have after we break the bread, say hamotzi, if we have wine after that, then that's another blessing?
That's a good question. We didn't get there yet. The answer is no, you don't have to make another blessing.
But that's wine with the meal. And if
Correct.
the wine, if the prayer you say first before we wash our hands, if that's not part of the meal, if it's before the meal, then we wash our hands and break the bread, and then we pour some more wine. So then that shouldn't that be, and that's part of the meal, then should that be another blessing?
It's a good question. I have to look more into it. My understanding is that it's very nuanced, that it's considered before the meal, but it's still part of the meal. I was like, the delivery guy is calling me again. Let me just pick up real quick. Hello. Okay. Do you see a white van? Are you at 6732 Sienna Club Place or Sienna Club Drive? Got it. Okay, so my address is on Sienna Club Place. It's closer to the, yeah, it's closer to the, it's in the same development. It's just closer to the front. You see garbage right next to you? Not a garbage truck. There's like a dumpster right next to my house. So if, is it a corner house? Is it a corner house? Okay, so then you're on Sienna Club Drive. So the next street over is Sienna Club Place, which is my house. Yeah, so you can just continue going forward, make a right and a right, and then you'll see the mailboxes and you'll see the dumpster and you'll see my house is the corner house. There will be a white van outside. My wife is inside. Thank you. Okay, hopefully that'll be easy enough. Okay. I'm sorry. So when it comes to wine, it's meaning we're all the table is already set. We're all around the table where we're going to be eating. So in terms of the actual wine, it's considered part of the meal because this is this is where we're eating and this is where we're going to be continuing to drink. However, the formal part of the meal starts once we break bread is when we start eating. So it's kind of in between. Does that answer the question?
Well, so the prayer before we wash our hands,
Mm-hmm.
not part of the meal, but it is part of the meal.
Exactly. There we
Uh,
go.
Maybe you could say that the prayer before we break bread or wash our hands starts the ritual of having a meal.
Perhaps,
Might be a way to put it.
perhaps. Or perhaps we could put it differently that it's part of the meal, but not because of the meal. In other words, we're drinking wine for wine. We're not drinking wine so that we can help get our food down.
Okay.
Perhaps we'll discuss this later. We'll see. Okay. Rav Nachman answered him that the Mishnah was not talking about one case where everybody was eating their food and then they had to make a blessing over each person had to make their own blessing and then after the meal they had to make another blessing. The Gemara is the Mishnah was talking about two separate cases. The first case is if wine was brought during the meal but not before the meal, so everyone has to make their own blessing. The second case is if wine did not come to them before during the meal, but only after the meal, then at that point one person can recite a blessing on behalf of them all. Next part of the Mishnah, one who recited a blessing over the bread exempted the appetizers as they are considered secondary to the bread because the bread signifies the meal. Therefore, anything that you're eating as part of the meal, the chicken, the soup, the kneplach, the knedlach, the gefilte fish, all the good stuff is all considered secondary to the bread. However, one who recited a blessing over the appetizers did not exempt the bread. Beis Shammai said that the blessing recited over the appetizers did not exempt even a cooked dish. A cooked dish would be something like a porridge that he ate during the meal. With regard to this case, a dilemma was raised before the sages. What is Beis Shammai arguing about? Which part are they arguing on? Are they arguing with the first clause of the Mishnah or the latter clause in the Mishnah? Let's break this down. It can be understood that the first Tana says one who recited a blessing over the bread exempted the appetizers. And of course, it exempted a cooked dish, which is made from grain. And Beis Shammai come to say that it goes without saying that the blessing over bread does not exempt the appetizers, as the blessing over bread does not even exempt a cooked dish. Or perhaps they're disagreeing with the end of it and saying that one who recited a blessing over the appetizers did not exempt the bread. By inference, the blessing did not exempt bread, but it did exempt a cooked dish made from grain, like porridge or things like that. And Beis Shammai come to say that the blessing over the appetizers did not exempt even a cooked dish. So there's two ways of reading the argument. Which way, what were they actually arguing about? The Gemara concludes, let us stand as this dilemma remains unresolved, and we'll see this a few times through the Talmud, that there are certain dilemmas that remain unresolved, and we're not sure what the argument is. The Mishnah distinguished between a case where several people were sitting to eat together, and they said that it's not considered a joint meal, and each and every diner had to recite a blessing for themselves. And the Mishnah differentiated between a case where they were reclining on divans, which renders it a joint meal, and one recites a blessing on behalf of them all. The Gemara infers from here that if they reclined, at that point it's considered a joint meal. And if they did not recline, no. If they didn't recline, that's not considered a meal, because that's what the divans are for. The divans are for reclining. The Gemara raises a contradiction. If there are 10 people walking on the road, even if they're all eating from one loaf, each and every one recites a blessing for himself. But if they sat down to eat, even if each and every one is eating from their own loaf, one can recite a blessing on behalf of them all, as it is considered a joint meal. In any case, we see over here very clearly that if they were sitting down to eat, even though they did not recline, it's still considered a joint meal. So apparently, according to this case, from either a Mishnah or a Brisa, I'm not sure, it seems very clear that if they were sitting together, and even though they were not reclining, it is considered a joint meal, and one person can make the blessing on behalf of them all. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, with regard to those walking along the road, it's different, because it's in a case where they say, let's go and eat in such and such a place. Since they designated a specific location to eat together in advance, that is already considered a joint meal, even if they don't recline. But they said, okay, we're walking together, let's sit under that tree and we'll go and have a picnic lunch. Well, that's a joint meal. On a similar note, the Gemara relates when Rav died, his students went after his casket to the city where he was going to be buried. When they returned, they said, let us go and eat bread on the banks of the Danak River. After they ate, they sat and raised the dilemma. Did we learn in the Mishnah specifically if they reclined, it is considered a joint meal? However, if they merely sat together, no, it is not considered a joint meal. Or perhaps, since they said in the beginning on the way back, let us go and eat in such and such a location, it is considered as if they reclined. And it was not within their capability to resolve this dilemma. They couldn't figure it out. Rav Ada Bar Abba stood 43a, 42b is in the book.
I think it's pretty clear that it was a joint meal.
Oh, very good. Let's see what Rav Ada Bar Abba says. I think you're right. He reversed his cloak so that the tear which he had rent in the morning for Rav, his teacher, was in the back. And in mourning, because he was so upset that he couldn't figure out what the law was, he rent another tear in the back of his garment, which is now in the front. He said, Rav is dead, and we have not yet learned the blessings of grace after meals. So they didn't know. They didn't know what the answer is because they didn't learn what you just learned. And they were so upset that their teacher passed away and they didn't learn the blessing, the laws of a blessing and the grace after meals. So while that was happening, a certain elder came by and saw them and answered their question by raising a contradiction from the Mishnah to the Brisa, as we just cited above. And he resolved it for them that since they said, "Let us go and eat in such and such a place," it is considered as if they reclined, and it is a joint meal. Very good. Zalman, you have been elected elder or proclaimed elder, that you were able to figure out the answer to their question. Back to the Mishnah, we said that if they were reclining, one can recite a blessing on behalf of them all. Rav said, this halacha was only taught with regard to bread, that it requires reclining to enable one to recite a blessing on behalf of them all. However, if they're drinking wine, they do not have to be reclining. But Rabbi Yochanan said even wine requires reclining as well. Some say that Rav said different, that the story was a little different. That Rav said the Mishnah only taught that reclining is effective and enables one to recite a blessing on behalf of them all if they're eating bread. However, if they're drinking wine, reclining is ineffective and each individual must recite a blessing for himself. And Rabbi Yochanan said that even with regard to wine, reclining is effective to join them together, and one person can now make a blessing for everyone. Okay. The Gemara raises an objection to this whole business based on a Tosefta. What is the order of reclining at a meal? How are you supposed to deal with your mealtime? The guests enter and sit upon benches and chairs until all are assembled. Afterward, they brought them water, and each and every one washes one hand in which to hold the cup of wine. When wine came before them prior to the meal, each and every one recites a blessing over the wine for himself. Then when they entered into the main chamber and reclined on the divans for the meal itself, water came before them. Despite the fact that each and every one already washed one hand, they washed both hands again prior to the meal, so they will be able to eat with both hands. And then they start eating their bread. If wine came before them during the meal, despite the fact that each and every one already recited a blessing for himself, one recites a blessing on behalf of them all. So from here it seems that during the meal they would have to make a new blessing on the wine. Rashi explains that the reason for that is very interesting. Okay, Zalman, this is going to answer your question. Rashi, which we have here in the blue and the black, he asked this question. His question is, why did they have to make a new blessing during the meal? Didn't they make a blessing on the wine before the meal? From that, it would seem that even if you made a blessing on wine before the meal, you still have to make a new blessing on the wine that you drink during the meal, which was exactly Zalman's question, correct?
Right.
Correct. So he answers that the reason why they need to make a new blessing during the meal is because it's in a different place. In the beginning, they were in the lobby, and now they're in the main ballroom. So since it's a different place, they have to make a new blessing.
And if it was in the same place, they wouldn't.
Correct. So, if so, according to that version that Rav said that this halacha was only taught with regard to bread, that it requires reclining to enable one to recite a blessing on behalf of them all. However, wine does not require reclining. If it's true that Rav said that for wine, even if you're all sitting together and you're not reclining on the divans, you do not have to have each person make a blessing on their own, and you can have one person making a blessing for everyone. The first clause of the Tosefta, which we read right now, taught that every guest recited a blessing over the wine for themselves. They were all sitting together in the lobby, and everyone makes their own blessing. So that is difficult. How could Rav say that you don't need to make a blessing, each person their own blessing, if the Tosefta said that they were all sitting around in the lobby and everyone had to make their own blessing? The Gemara answers, guests are different. because when they're sitting in the hall prior to the meal, their intention is to leave and enter the dining room. Therefore, while there, their drinking together is not considered a joint meal. Let's look back here again a second. It said, the guests enter and sit up on benches and chairs until all are assembled. What does that mean? That doesn't mean that they're all sitting together. It means that we're waiting for everyone to come. So each person, as they come in, and we're waiting to be ushered into the ballroom. So while we're waiting for the guests, everyone's sitting down, and each person is just drinking wine. It's, like they have sometimes waiters coming through with, finger foods on a tray. So here they were all sitting down in chairs and drinking wine, but it wasn't part of the meal. It's just while we're waiting for everyone to show up. And therefore, each person makes a blessing on their own, and it's not considered a joint meal. Okay, what about the other version of what Rav said? According to the other version, Rav said that the Mishnah only taught that reclining is effective and enables one to recite a blessing on behalf of them all is when they're eating bread. However, with regard to a group of drinking wine, reclining is not effective. And even if you are reclining, each individual must recite a blessing for himself. So based on that, the latter clause of the Tosefta, where we learned that while they were in the big ballroom and they were all drinking wine and they were all reclining, and the Tosefta said one recites a blessing on behalf of all of them, how could Rav say that reclining does not cause or does not allow for one person to make a blessing on behalf of everyone? The Gemara responds, there it is different. Since the reclining is effective for the bread, it works for the wine as well. Since they're in the middle of a meal, if their reclining is helping them, that one person can make a blessing on the bread for everyone, one person can make a blessing on the wine for everyone too. Perfect timing. Okay, we learned in the Mishnah that is going to be for next week, God willing. I'm going to stop share. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. What's tomorrow, 11 a.m.? I apologize. Give me just a second. Building something that lasts, the crucial difference between temporary career achievements and a true legacy. And the only way to ensure that your values will continue to live on. We're going to be learning from Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac tomorrow at 11 a.m. Also, please look out for an email today, God willing, with details and the RSVP to let us know you'll be coming. Come either way. But if you can fill out that link, it helps me know how many guys to prepare for. It'll be this Friday at 6 p.m. for a beautiful Shabbat dinner.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Take care. See you guys Friday.
Bye-bye.
Sorry.